Hey guys! Tonight we're sneaking into a party you probably wouldn't want an invitation to an exclusive feast at Olympus, hosted by none other than Hera herself. Picture this marble floors so polished they could blind you, goblets of nectar that sparkle under candlelight, and a guest list that reads like a who's who of immortal drama. But here's the thing, this night won't go as planned. In fact, you probably won't survive this feast in one piece. Not that the gods care much for mortals crashing their banquets anyway. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And of course, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge up the winding path that leads to the Palace of Olympus. Even though you know you're technically not supposed to be here, curiosity, or maybe that dull ache of boredom in your mortal soul, keeps your feet moving. The sky above is streaked with colors the mortal world could never conjure. Molten orange melting into dusky purple, each shade promising a night of divine mischief. As you cross the threshold, you're greeted by the faint strains of music and the scent of roasted peacock, Hera's favorite. The invitations had gone out weeks ago, etched in gold leaf and sealed with her personal crest. Everyone who was anyone in Olympus had been summoned. Mortals obviously were not on the guest list. But somehow, here you are, slipping in unnoticed. Historians still argue whether Hera's motives that night were purely social, or if she had a hidden agenda. After all, she's a goddess who never plays her cards too openly. Some say it was a peace offering to calm the endless squabbles between her kin. Others whisper it was a chance to assert her role as queen of the gods. All you know is that the invitations glittered like stardust and there was no turning back. As you shuffle past the great bronze doors, a sudden gust of cold air bites your skin, Olympus's greeting to the uninvited. Inside the hall is a riot of color and sound. Silk banners in every hue ripple from the ceiling, flickering in the torchlight. Statues of past heroes and lesser-known gods loom along the walls, their stony eyes seeming to track your every move. It's a place meant to awe, and it works. Your breath catches in your throat, but you keep going. At the center of the room stands Hera herself, clad in a gown, the color of storm clouds, eyes glinting like a dagger's edge. She's every inch the queen tonight, but there's a tension around her mouth that suggests even she doesn't know what's coming. She sweeps her gaze over the room, and for a brief moment you're sure she sees you. But then she's smiling at someone else, a flicker of warmth that vanishes just as quickly. You're jostled by a nymph carrying a tray piled high with pomegranate seeds, each one glistening like a drop of blood. The air smells of roasted figs, honey, and a hint of something more metallic, like the tang of a distant storm. You hear snippets of conversation, Ares boasting of his last battle, Aphrodite giggling behind her hand at some mortal trinket Hermes, muttering to himself as he pockets a handful of olives. It's a cacophony of divine nonsense and hushed conspiracies. A fringe tidbit you overhear, apparently ambrosia. Yes, that fabled food of the gods doesn't always sit well with mortals. In some secret corners of the palace, it's rumored to be more than just a delicacy. It's a test. One bite and you're either blessed with immortal visions or left retching in the shadows. No one here seems concerned though. They've been at this game for centuries. The banquet hall itself is a labyrinth of mismatched tables. Hera never could decide if she preferred order or controlled chaos. Each table groans under the weight of golden platters and silver cups, and yet you can't help but notice the way some guests glance nervously at the center seat reserved for Zeus. It's empty for now, but everyone knows it's only a matter of time before the thundercloud himself makes an entrance. As you edge closer to the center of the hall, the tension grows thicker like honey, left too long in the sun. You catch a glimpse of a satyr trying to steal a kiss from a dryad who looks like she'd rather turn him into a tree. Nearby, Dionysus lounges with a half-empty goblet, his cheeks already flushed, and his laughter echoing like a promise of trouble. It's a scene that would make even the most seasoned partygoer pause. You're close enough now to see the flicker of annoyance in Hera's eyes. She spent weeks planning every last detail, each rose petal, each polished plate, and yet there's already a sense that it's slipping from her grasp. You can't help but wonder, is it possible for even a goddess to be undone by her own ambition? Historians still debate how much of that night was fate, and how much was simply bad planning. You decide to find a seat at the edge of the room, out of the way, but with a perfect view of the drama unfolding. Your heart pounds in your chest, but you force yourself to stay calm. After all, you're just an observer here, at least for now. The feast has barely begun, but already you sense that the night is veering off script. Hera's smile is tight, her voice a touch too sweet as she greets each new arrival. Somewhere in the distance, a thunderclap rolls across the sky. You shiver, not from cold, but from the certainty that this night, this feast is going to be remembered for all the wrong reasons. The great bronze doors creak shut behind you, and you're officially inside this divine affair. You shuffle in carefully, your eyes darting between the guests, as you try not to look like you stumbled in by accident, which, let's be real, you absolutely did. The scent of roasted peacock still lingers in the air, but now it's joined by the sharper tang of spiced wine, Dionysus is doing, no doubt. The first thing you notice is how every god seems to arrive with an entourage. Ares storms in, surrounded by his hoplite warriors, each one glaring like they're about to start a brawl over the last fig tart. Artemis appears with a pack of silent, watchful nymphs at her heels, their eyes flicking from shadow to shadow, as if the forest itself followed them in. Even Apollo doesn't travel alone, his tunic shimmering like morning light as he gestures grandly to a crowd of mortal poets hanging on his every word. You, though, you're alone, and you feel it. But that doesn't stop you from pressing forward, your sandals clicking softly on the marble as you weave through the clusters of divine gossip. The music swells and dips harps and lyres, competing with the hum of whispered insults and promises. Historians still argue whether the awkwardness in the air was because of Hera's mood, or because the gods themselves can't go 5 minutes without trying to outshine each other. You're almost knocked off your feet by a sudden swirl of color, Aphrodite radiant as dawn sweeping past you in a gown that shimmers with every step. She doesn't see you. She's too busy scanning the crowd for the next poor soul to fawn over her. A fringe tidbit, her beauty was said to be so blinding that even the polished marble floors of Olympus cracked beneath her feet. You don't see any cracks here, but you wouldn't be surprised if the palace itself was holding its breath. You find yourself next to a pillar, one of those massive columns that seems to scrape the ceiling. You lean against it, grateful for the support as you take in the scene. At the far end of the hall, you spot Hera's throne draped in peacock feathers that shift in the flickering torchlight. She sits there for a moment, a picture of calm authority, but you see the way her fingers drum against the armrest. The queen is restless tonight. A hush falls over the crowd as Zeus finally arrives, his footsteps as heavy as the thunder that follows him. His robe is a simple white, but it glows with an inner light that makes everyone else look dim by comparison. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. The air itself seems to lean closer to hear his thoughts. He casts a glance at Hera, and something unspoken passes between them. You wonder if even the gods can read each other's minds, or if they're all just as clueless as mortals when it comes to love and power. As the king of the gods settles in his seat, the rest of the hall seems to breathe again. Conversations resume, laughter bubbles up, and the music picks up a lively tune. Someone's idea of a distraction, no doubt. You're caught in the swirl of it all, feeling like a piece of driftwood in a river of immortal arrogance and ambition. You catch a glimpse of a mortal bard tuning his lyre in a corner, his fingers trembling. Poor soul. He's here to sing of heroic deeds, but from the way he's sweating, you doubt he'll get through a single verse. You overhear a nymph giggle that he's been practicing the same song for weeks. A reminder that even in Olympus, some things never change. Stage fright is eternal. The doors swing open again, and a sudden gust of wind chills your skin. Another guest arrives, but this one you don't recognize, a mortal woman with eyes like polished jet. She carries a tray of honey cakes, each one topped with a single almond. She moves silently, her footsteps barely a whisper on the marble. A servant, you guess. But there's something in the way she moves, graceful, sure, that makes you wonder if she's more than she seems. You watch her weave through the crowd, offering her tray to anyone who will take one. Most of the gods ignore her, their attention fixed on their petty squabbles and boasts. But you notice how Hermes pauses just for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he watches her. Historians still debate whether she was a minor goddess in disguise, or just a mortal who learned how to walk like one. The music shifts again, a lilting melody that seems to curl around your thoughts. You feel a tug at your heart, a pull to join the laughter, to forget that you don't belong here. But you stay where you are, hidden in plain sight. Because you know that banquets like this are traps. They glitter and dazzle, but beneath the golden surface there's always something sharp waiting to catch the unwary. Aphrodite has found a mortal poet to fawn over, and she's laughing like moonlight on water. Ares flexes his arms in the corner, each muscle tensed, as if he's ready to leap at the first insult. Dionysus refills his cup for the third, or is it the fourth time, the wine dark as the night outside. And you, still pressed against that cold marble pillar, can't shake the feeling that you've stumbled into the opening act of a very dangerous play. A faint tremor runs through the floor, so subtle you almost think you imagined it. But then you see Hera's eyes flick toward the shadows behind her throne, and you know this night has only just begun, and already the cracks are starting to show. The music swells again, trying to drown out the unease that buzzes like a wasp in the air. You edge away from the pillar, curiosity propelling you deeper into the swirling chaos of gods and gossip. That's when you catch sight of the feast itself, and oh, it's a sight to behold. The tables groan under the weight of ambrosia and nectar, heaped on silver platters that gleam like captured moonlight. Roasted boar glistens with honey-glazed plates of olives, glimmer green-black like river stones, and pyramids of pomegranates sit like small blood-red mountains. Every flavor you can imagine is there laid out for the gods and their favorites. You watch as a nymph plucks a cube of honeycomb from a golden plate and lets it dissolve on her tongue, her eyes closing in bliss. The sweet perfume of it drifts over to you, and your stomach growls in protest. But you remember the warnings, mortal tongues aren't meant for ambrosia, and besides, you're not here to feast, you're here to watch. A fringe tidbit, the ambrosia itself, it's said, was originally a rare flower found only on the slopes of Olympus, so potent it could kill or crown a mortal in a single breath. Historians still argue whether this was literal or just poetic exaggeration. Here, though, it seems a little too plausible. Zeus leans back in his chair, fingers drumming on the armrest as he surveys the hall. He looks almost bored, as if he's seen it all before, because let's face it, he probably has. His thunderbolt rests at his feet, wrapped in a cloth of sky blue silk, but you can see the faint glow of lightning beneath. Even at his most languid, the king of the gods is always just one flicker away from fury. You turn your gaze back to the tables and see Hera watching everything with a tight smile. Her guests might be oblivious, but you can tell she notices every detail, the spilled cup of nectar here, the hushed argument there. She's trying to hold it all together, but the more she tries, the more it seems to slip through her fingers. The music falters for a moment as Apollo strides forward, his lyre slung across his back. He's wearing a wreath of laurel, fresh and green, and his tunic is so bright it almost hurts to look at. He gives the crowd a dazzling smile, a little too dazzling, you think, and begins to play. The notes are sweet at first, bright and clear as a mountain spring. But there's something off in the melody, a sour note that creeps in like a spider on silk. You see a few of the muses wince their fingers, tapping an impatient rhythm on their wine cups. Apollo, god of music, playing a song that doesn't quite fit. You wonder if even he can't find the right tune for a night like this. Historians still debate what was wrong with that music. Some say Apollo was distracted by Aphrodite's laughter. Others claim he simply didn't care enough to try. But in that moment, the discord feels like a warning. Even the gods can't pretend everything's perfect forever. A hush falls over the nearest table as Dionysus raises his goblet and takes a long, slow drink. The wine is deep red, almost black, and he lets it spill a little down his chin as he laughs, a low, lazy sound that sends shivers down your spine. A satyr at his elbow nudges him, whispering something you can't hear, but it's enough to make Dionysus laugh even harder. And there, in the middle of it all, sits a mortal man who looks like he's trying to disappear. He's dressed in simple linen, his eyes wide as he watches the gods feast and quarrel. He reaches for a cup of nectar, but his hand trembles. You wonder who he is, some poor bard dragged here to sing, or maybe a mortal who caught Hera's eye for reasons no one will ever understand. In a place like this, both seem equally dangerous. You slip closer, careful to keep your footsteps quiet on the marble floor. The music swells again, Apollo's fingers working faster now, but the sour note never quite goes away. You see Aphrodite toss her hair and roll her eyes, bored already. Ares flexes his shoulders as if itching for an excuse to turn this into a battle. And through it all, Hera's smile never falters, but you see the flicker of something else behind her eyes. Fury, maybe, or just the exhaustion of trying to keep the impossible in balance. A whisper near your ear, Hermes passing by with a tray of spiced figs. Careful, he murmurs, and you startle. The night's still young and the wine's already biting. Then he's gone, weaving between guests like a rumor on the wind. You glance around, suddenly aware of how close the walls feel, how heavy the air has grown. It's like the whole palace is holding its breath, waiting to see who will snap first. You see the mortal man take a cautious sip of nectar, his eyes widening as the taste blooms across his tongue. For a moment, he looks like he's glimpsed heaven. Then he sways, and you realize that for mortals, even a taste of the gods can be too much. You wonder what will happen when the ambrosia runs out, when the music finally falters, when the thin veneer of civility cracks. Because if there's one thing you've learned tonight, it's that even at the height of their power, the gods can be as petty as foolish, and as desperate as the mortals who watch from the shadows. The night stretches on each moment, a thread pulling tighter around the hall. You drift through the clusters of laughter and side eyes, a shadow among brighter lights. And there, in the heart of it all, you notice Zeus himself starting to fidget. You almost laugh how many mortal feasts have ended in disaster because the host lost interest. Apparently, even the king of the gods can get bored. Zeus's hand drums a slow beat on the table fingers, tapping out a rhythm that doesn't match Apollo's music. His eyes scan the hall, skipping from face to face. You can see it, the restless crackle of thunder in his veins, the weight of immortality pressing down like a storm cloud on his brow. Historians still argue whether Zeus ever truly enjoyed these banquets, or if he only attended because Hera expected it. Watching him now, you'd wager on the latter. A nymph passes by with a platter of honeyed dates, and Zeus plucks one absently. He doesn't even glance at her, his attention already drifting. The sweet scent of the fruit hangs in the air, but it's as if he can't taste it anymore. You wonder what it must feel like to have tasted everything, to know that nothing new can surprise you. The fringe tidbit you catch from a passing servant, some claim that the first time nectar was poured, it was in honor of a mortal hero who died saving the gods. But that was ages ago, and tonight, the only thing being saved is face. Zeus shifts in his seat and a hush ripples outward, unnoticed by most, but felt by you. His eyes flicker to Hera, and for a moment there's something almost human in that glance, a flicker of weariness, or maybe the silent plea of a man trapped in his own myth. Then it's gone, replaced by the impassive stare of a god who has seen centuries unfold like petals of a too familiar flower. Aphrodite slides closer to Zeus's throne, her laughter like warm honey dripped over something sharp. She reaches out to brush a speck of dust from his sleeve, her movement slow and deliberate. You see the glint in her eyes, the way her lips curve just so. She's playing a game, and you're not sure if Zeus even notices, or if he just doesn't care. Nearby, Ares brags to anyone who will listen about the spoils of his last campaign. His voice is a deep rumble, and each boast is bigger than the last. But you notice the way his fingers curl around the hilt of his sword, the restless twitch in his shoulders. War never leaves him even here. And you can't help but wonder what's more dangerous, Ares in battle, or Ares bored at a feast. You edge closer to a group of lesser gods, their laughter forced and a little too loud. They gossip in low voices, casting glances at the head table. One of them, a minor river spirit, leans in and murmurs, "He'll start a storm if this goes on much longer." Another snickers, but their laughter dies quickly. They all know the truth. Zeus's boredom is as dangerous as his fury. The music takes a breath, the pause hanging heavy in the air. Apollo flicks his fingers across the strings of his lyre, searching for a melody that will soothe the growing tension. But it's no use. The room feels like it's teetering on the edge of something you can't quite name. Then Zeus speaks just a single word, but it's enough to stop every conversation in its tracks. Enough. His voice is soft, but it carries echoing off the marble walls like a challenge. He doesn't rise, doesn't even raise his head. But in that moment, you feel the air itself lean closer. A servant stumbles, nearly dropping a tray of figs. You see the fear in his eyes, mortal or not. No one wants to be the reason Zeus stands. But Zeus only sighs, his shoulders slumping slightly, as if even this small display of power costs him something. You watch Hera's lips press together, her eyes flashing for an instant with something like irritation. She's worked so hard for this night, planned every detail down to the last polished goblet. But Zeus's boredom is like a crack in the marble, a flaw she can't smooth over. Historians still debate whether Hera's fury that night was for Zeus's indifference or for her own wounded pride. Watching her now, you suspect it was both. The music resumes softer this time, like a balm poured over raw nerves. Apollo's fingers move with practiced ease, but his eyes flick nervously toward the head of the table. You see the strain in his smile. This is no longer a performance. It's a test. You drift back to the edges of the hall, feeling the shift in the air. The laughter is quieter now, the music gentler. But beneath it all, there's a tension that crackles like the faint scent of ozone before a summer storm. And you realize this night isn't just a banquet. It's a stage, and every god and mortal here is playing their part. Some roles are chosen, some are forced, but all of them know the truth. When Zeus grows bored, the world itself holds its breath. You slip along the fringes of the room, the air heavy with the scent of spiced wine and the sweet, heady perfume of ambrosia. You try to blend in, to be just another shadow moving in and out of the torchlight. But here, every eye seems to see more than it should. Near the center of the hall, Aphrodite reclines on a cushioned bench, the glow of the torches catching in her golden hair. She laughs softly, each note of her amusement shimmering like moonlight on still water. You watch her watch the crowd, and you see the calculation in her gaze. She isn't just the goddess of love tonight. She's the queen of every mortal's longing, every god's vanity. Aphrodite rises, her gown of seafoam silk rustling like gentle waves. She moves through the hall with a grace that's almost hypnotic, each step measured and deliberate. The eyes of every god, every mortal follow her. It's not just beauty, it's the power of being seen, of knowing that everyone in the room is trying not to stare. You catch a fringe tidbit from a passing satyr, apparently. Aphrodite's mirror isn't just for checking her hair. They say it's enchanted, able to show not just the face, but the secret desires of whoever dares to look. Historians still argue whether the mirror truly held that power, or if it was just another of her tricks, a prop in the performance of her endless allure. She stops beside a mortal poet, a young man who's been clutching his lyre like a lifeline. His face goes red as she leans in close, her perfume enveloping him in a cloud of sweet roses and salt air. "Sing for me," she purrs, her voice low and honeyed. The poet opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. His hands tremble, the lyre slipping from his grasp. Aphrodite smiles, and you can almost see the poor mortal's soul shiver under her gaze. Ares is watching too, his lips twisting into a smirk. He sprawls in his chair like a coiled spring, one hand on the hilt of his sword. There's a challenge in his eyes, a silent dare aimed at anyone who thinks they can resist the goddess's charms. You suspect he enjoys the games as much as she does, just in a different way. Meanwhile, Dionysus has abandoned his goblet entirely, choosing instead to let a satyr pour the wine directly into his mouth. He laughs deep and throaty, his cheeks flushed with drink. You can't help but smile, there's something almost comforting in his complete disregard for decorum. He's the only one here who seems to be having fun for fun's sake. But even he watches Aphrodite now, his eyes glittering with amusement and maybe something darker. Because for all her beauty, Aphrodite is as dangerous as she is divine. And tonight, she's decided to put on a show. She glides to the center of the hall, her laughter weaving through the music like silver thread. "Look at you all," she says, her voice ringing clear. So serious, so determined to be impressive. Why not remember what it means to enjoy the night? She raises her arms, and the hall seems to brighten around her, as if the very torches lean in to hear her words. Aphrodite twirls her gown shimmering, and the music shifts to match her movement, faster, wilder, a melody meant for dancing. She smiles at Ares, at Dionysus, at every god and mortal in the hall. "Come dance with me," she commands, and though she speaks softly, her voice is the tide itself, pulling you forward whether you will or not. You're caught in it too, this sudden heady rush of music and laughter and the scent of roses. For a moment, you almost forget why you're here, why you're hiding. You're just another figure in the swirling dance, another mortal lost in the flickering torchlight. But then you see Hera standing by her throne, her face like marble. Her eyes are hard, her lips pressed thin. She watches Aphrodite with something that's not quite jealousy, but something colder. You wonder if this is what she feared all along, that her carefully planned night would become Aphrodite's stage, that even here in her own hall, she would be outshone. Historians still debate whether Hera hated Aphrodite or simply resented the power she wielded. Watching them now, you think it's both. Because here, beauty is a weapon, and no one wields it better than the goddess of love. The music surges, and Aphrodite throws her head back and laughs a sound that seems to fill every corner of the room. Ares rises, drawn in despite himself, his movements predatory and eager. Even Apollo stops playing for a moment, his fingers hovering above the strings as he watches the dance begin. And you, well, you can only watch heart hammering in your chest as the night spins faster and faster around you. Because in that moment you realize that the worst banquet isn't one where the food is spoiled or the music is bad. It's the one where you can't look away, even though you know you should. The dance is in full swing now, a whirl of silk and shadows, laughter and whispered threats. You stand at the edge, your heart racing as you watch the gods lose themselves in the rhythm. But then, as if summoned by the music itself, a new figure steps into the circle. A figure carrying something small and golden, something that glints like a shard of the sun. A hush falls over the room, the music faltering for a heartbeat. The figure is Eris, goddess of discord, her smile sharp enough to cut through the thickest fog of Dionysus's wine. She moves with an ease that belies the chaos she brings, each step deliberate and mocking. You feel the hair on the back of your neck rise. Eris never shows up without a reason, and tonight, you suspect her reason is about to turn the entire feast upside down. She holds up the golden apple in her hand, turning it so the flickering torchlight dances over the inscription. You don't need to see the words to know what they say. To the fairest. A simple phrase, but in this room, it's a spark in a powder keg. Aphrodite pauses mid-spin, her laughter catching in her throat. Hera's eyes narrow, her lips tightening like a bowstring. Even Athena, who has been lurking near the back of the room, steps forward, her gaze locked on the apple. Historians still argue whether this was the first time these three goddesses competed so openly, or if it was just the most famous. Either way, you can feel the air change, thickening like storm clouds on a summer afternoon. Eris doesn't say a word. She doesn't have to. She holds out the apple, her smile never wavering, and then she lets it fall. It lands on a low table with a soft thump, but the sound seems to echo through the hall like a thunderclap. The music stops entirely this time, the silence a living thing that presses in on your ears. A fringe tidbit, some say the golden apple was forged in the fires of Hephaestus's forge, a little trinket meant for mischief. Others claim it was older than the gods themselves, a gift or a curse from some forgotten spirit of chaos. Historians still debate which is true, but in this moment, none of that matters. All that matters is the way the three goddesses stare at it, each one already calculating what it will take to claim it as her own. You edge back a step, trying to melt into the shadows. The last thing you want is to be caught in the crossfire of divine rivalry. You can see Ares, his fingers drumming a restless tattoo on the hilt of his sword. He looks almost eager for the fight he knows is coming. Dionysus just laughs a low, amused sound and raises his cup as if to toast the coming storm. Aphrodite steps forward first, her smile slow and sure. "It's mine," she purrs, her voice honeyed and confident. Who else could it possibly be, for she reaches for the apple, but before her fingers touch it, Hera's hand shoots out, snatching it away. Hera's voice is low, but there's steel in it. "This is my hall," she says, each word sharp and precise. "And in my hall, I decide who is fairest." You see the flicker of challenge in Aphrodite's eyes, the way her lips curve into a smile that doesn't reach her eyes. Athena, ever the strategist, steps closer. She doesn't bother with honeyed words. She just holds out her hand, palm up, her gaze steady. "Let us settle this fairly," she says, her tone calm, but her eyes glint with determination. "Let the gods decide, not the one who seeks to divide." Eris watches them with a smile that never falters, her eyes dancing with amusement. She doesn't speak, but you can almost hear her laughter in the silence. This is what she came for, the chaos blooming like a poisonous flower in the heart of Hera's feast. You glance at Hera, see the way her knuckles whiten around the apple, the way her jaw tightens. This was supposed to be her night, her triumph. But now the golden apple has stolen the spotlight, turning everything she built into a stage for someone else's drama. The room holds its breath, waiting to see who will break first. You see Apollo watching from the corner, his lyre silent in his hands. You see Artemis, her eyes cool and assessing as if she's already calculating how this will end. And you see Zeus, his expression unreadable, his fingers drumming on the table once more. Historians still debate whether this was the night the seeds of the Trojan War were truly sown, or if it was just another game among immortals that mortals would pay for later. But in this moment, none of that matters to you. All that matters is the golden apple and the way it glows in the flickering torchlight, a promise and a threat wrapped in a single word: fairest. The air hangs heavy as the last note of Apollo's lyre fades, a single thread of sound that stretches the silence taut. You watch the three goddesses, each one balanced between fury and calculation, as if the slightest breath would tip them into war. Around them, the feast is still. Even the satyrs, normally the rowdiest guests, hold their tongues, their eyes wide with anticipation. Apollo clears his throat as if to break the spell, but no one notices. The tension is a living thing pressing against your chest and making it hard to breathe. Hera holds the apple tight, her knuckles white against the gold. Aphrodite's smile has turned to something sharper, her eyes glinting like the edge of a dagger. And Athena, calm, precise, watches them both. Her hand still outstretched, waiting for reason to prevail. A fringe tidbit from an old storyteller's whisper, they say the apple was meant for none of them. That it was a test set by fate itself, a way to see how far divine pride could stretch before it snapped. Historians still argue whether that's true, but tonight it's clear that pride is the only thing that matters. Finally, Zeus speaks his voice, a low rumble like distant thunder. This is not the time, he says, each word heavy with warning. Not here. Not tonight. His eyes flicker to Hera, and there's something almost pleading in that look. You wonder if he knows that even he can't stop what's coming. Hera's jaw tightens, but she nods. Very well, she says, and the words taste like ash. She places the apple on a silver platter, holding it out as if it's nothing more than a piece of fruit. Let it be decided elsewhere, but not in my hall. The moment she lets go, the tension snaps like a bowstring. Athena steps back, her gaze steady but unreadable. Aphrodite's smile returns softer now, but no less dangerous. And Eris, she simply bows, a mocking, elegant sweep that somehow manages to be both apology and insult. The music stirs again, softer this time, like a cautious sigh. Apollo plucks the strings of his lyre, the melody gentle and a little sad. It's a balm for the frayed edges of the night, but you can see that the damage is done. The golden apple has stolen the feast's soul, and no music can bring it back. You drift back to the edge of the hall, your pulse still racing. The gods are gods, but tonight they seem more human than ever, petty, proud, and so desperate to be seen. You wonder if that's what immortality does to you, makes every slight feel like an insult that will last forever. Hera's smile is back, but it's a thin thing, fragile as a spider's web. She claps her hands, summoning a line of nymphs bearing fresh platters of food-roasted boar, glistening with honey baskets of figs, and dates jugs of wine so dark they swallow the light. She's determined to wrestle the night back into her control, to remind everyone that this is her feast, her triumph. Ares leaps up, his laughter loud and a little too sharp. A toast, he bellows, raising his goblet high. To the fairest, whoever she may be, there's a ripple of laughter, uneasy but willing. Because what else can they do? The show must go on, even if the stage is crumbling beneath them. Dionysus obliges his own cup brimming with wine as he shouts his agreement. He pours a stream of wine onto the marble floor, a libation to the madness of the night. The liquid glitters in the torchlight, red as spilled blood, and for a moment you wonder if that's all this feast really is, a ritual to keep the chaos at bay. Aphrodite slides back to her seat, her laughter a soft ripple that doesn't reach her eyes. Athena returns to the shadows, her expression thoughtful, already planning whatever comes next. And Eris. Well, Eris has vanished, slipping away like a shadow at dusk. Her work here is done for now. You catch a mortal servant's eye, a girl no older than you, her hands trembling as she pours wine for a minor river god. She sees your unease and gives you a tiny, knowing smile, as if to say, this is Olympus, and nights like this are just another form of worship. Historians still debate whether the apple's appearance was fate or folly, whether Eris's mischief was the seed of a war that would one day burn the world. But tonight, in the flickering glow of the torches, all you know is that the feast is forever changed. The golden apple sits on its silver platter, a silent promise of ruin and glory, and the music of the gods plays on as if it can drown out the whispers of what's to come. And you still press to the edge of it all, can only watch caught in the bright, brittle beauty of a night that's already starting to crack. You watch Hera's face as she forces a smile, her eyes moving across the room, like a searchlight trying to snuff out the embers of discord left by Eris's golden apple. But even the queen of the gods can't mend a crack once it's there. You can see it in the way her shoulders stiffen, the way her fingers twitch at the hem of her storm cloud gown. She's holding this feast together by sheer will, and you wonder how much longer she can keep it up. Hera lifts her goblet, and the crowd takes the hint. They raise theirs too, the flicker of the torches reflected in dark wine and golden nectar. "Let us toast," she says, her voice calm and cool as marble. "To the bonds that hold us to the hearth that warms us, and to the night that brings us together." It's a pretty speech, but you can feel the tension coiled beneath it like a snake under silk. The gods drink, but you notice the way Aphrodite's eyes stay fixed on the apple, the way Athena's fingers drum against her cup, as if counting down to something only she can see. Ares downs his drink in one long swallow and slams the goblet down a sharp crack of metal on marble. "Enough of this," he growls. "A feast is meant for revelry, not for whispered threats and half smiles." He rises his broad shoulders, throwing shadows across the nearest nymphs who squeak and scurry out of his way. Historians still argue whether Ares was truly as bloodthirsty as his legend, or if he simply played the part he'd been given by poets and priests. But tonight, you see the truth in his restless movements, the way his fingers flex, as if they're already wrapped around a spear. War is in his bones, and peace makes him itch. Hera's lips press into a thin line, but she doesn't stop him. Maybe she hopes that if Ares can burn off some of his fury in a duel or a dance, he won't turn that fury on the feast itself. Ares' gaze sweeps the room, daring anyone to meet it. And then he sees you. For a moment, your breath stops. His eyes are like polished bronze, bright and hard. A slow smile spreads across his face, feral hungry. "You," he says, his voice, a low rumble that seems to vibrate through the marble beneath your feet. "Come, dance with me." You feel your heart stutter in your chest. The room goes silent, every eye on you. You're just a mortal, a shadow at the edge of their world. But tonight, even mortals can be pulled into the gods' games. Ares strides forward, his hand outstretched. You hesitate, but you know there's no refusing. Not here. Not now. You take his hand, and his grip is warm, firm, and utterly unyielding. The music stirs again, a low, pulsing beat that seems to come from the very bones of the palace. Ares leads you into the circle of light at the center of the hall, his movements precise and predatory. He doesn't smile as he begins the steps of the ancient dance, but there's a glint of challenge in his eyes, and you can feel the thrill of it shiver down your spine. A fringe tidbit you'd overheard earlier from a dryad. The gods' dances are older than memory itself. Each step a prayer, each turn a promise. But tonight, it feels more like a duel than a prayer. The music rises, and Ares pulls you close, his arm like iron around your waist. You're swept along the world, blurring into torchlight and music, and the heat of his body beside yours. You catch glimpses of the other gods watching Aphrodite with a smirk. Dionysus with laughter in his eyes. Hermes leaning forward like a fox sniffing out a secret. Hera watches too, her expression unreadable. Perhaps she sees this dance as a distraction, a chance to steer the night back to the revelry she planned. Or perhaps she sees it as another crack in the perfect veneer of her feast. Historians still debate whether Hera's anger that night was directed at the apple, or at the way her carefully crafted knife kept slipping further out of her control. Ares spins you the world, tilting around you in a dizzying rush. You try to keep your breathing steady to match the rhythm of the music, but it's impossible. You're a mortal in the arms of a god, and each step feels like it could crack the marble beneath your feet. The music quickens, and Ares laughs, a sharp, wild sound that echoes in your bones. You feel the edge of danger in it, the promise that if you stumble, he won't let you fall. He'll just spin you faster, push you harder. The world is a blur of color and sound, but you cling to his hand like it's the only solid thing left. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the music slows. Ares pulls you close, his breath warm against your ear. Not bad, he murmurs, and you can't tell if it's praise or a warning. He releases you, and you stumble back a step, your heart hammering like a drum. Around you, the feast exhales the tension, easing just a little. Ares grins and turns away, already searching for his next diversion. You find your place back at the edge of the room, your breath coming in ragged gasps. The dance is over, but you can still feel the weight of his hands on your skin, the echo of his laughter in your bones. And as you watch the rest of the feast swirl on, you realize that for one brief moment you were part of the gods' endless games. The feast resumes its rhythm, the music picking up where it left off, the laughter swelling again like waves crashing on a distant shore. You find a quiet corner near a marble column, your hands still tingling from Ares' touch, your mind whirling with the knowledge that even mortals can be pulled into the orbit of the gods. Hera watches the dance floor, her eyes flickering like candle flames. She forces a smile, but you can see the strain around her mouth, the tension in her shoulders. She's holding on to the night with both hands determined to bend it back to her will. But every time she smooths one wrinkle, another appears like trying to trap moonlight in a net. Near the hearth, Dionysus has grown bored with his wine, and now pours cup after cup into the open mouths of giggling nymphs. His laughter booms through the hall, warm and thick as honey, and for a moment it almost feels like the night could be saved by sheer joy alone. But you know better. You see the way his eyes flicker bright, a little wild, like a man who knows the party will end and can't quite bear to watch it. A servant passes close by, carrying a tray laden with roasted boar and pomegranate seeds. The scent of spiced meat and sweet fruit fills the air, and your stomach growls in protest. You remember that old fringe tidbit in some corners of the ancient world. Pomegranate seeds were a symbol of promises made in the dark, of bargains struck, and debts that never quite go away. Historians still argue whether that was myth or just a poet's fancy, but tonight it feels like every seed on that tray holds a secret. You shift your weight against the cool marble, letting your breath steady. Across the room, you catch a glimpse of Hephaestus, the god of the forge. He sits alone at a small table, his broad hands resting in his lap, his eyes distant. The forge has gone cold tonight. No sparks, no hammer ringing on anvil. Even his laughter seems to have been left behind in the quiet of his workshop. Hephaestus doesn't move to join the dance or the drinking. Instead, he watches the shadows of the flames as they flicker on the walls, each flicker like a memory. You wonder what he sees there, what failures, what triumphs. Historians still debate whether Hephaestus truly loved his craft, or if he simply saw in the flames a reflection of his own pain. Tonight, he seems like a man who has already spent all his fire. You edge closer to his table, drawn by the hush around him. There's something comforting in the stillness, a refuge from the constant swirl of music and laughter. He doesn't look at you, but his lips curve in a faint smile, as if he knows you're there. "It's a noisy night," he says, his voice low and steady, the rumble of a forge, banked low but still alive. But even the gods need silence sometimes. His words settle over you like a blanket, warm and heavy. You find yourself nodding, grateful for the moment of calm. Hephaestus picks up a small piece of metal from the table, a coin, or maybe a charm, and turns it over in his fingers. They dance. He says, his gaze on the firelight, but all the while they're thinking of what comes next, of what they can take, what they can win. He looks up at you, and for a moment his eyes seem to glow with the banked embers of something fierce. Even here, everything has a cost. A mortal bard stumbles past his lyre, clutched tight against his chest, his face pale. He's drunk on nectar, his song slurring into nonsense that no one listens to. You see the flicker of pity in Hephaestus's eyes, pity, and maybe a little envy. The bard can stumble and falter, but the forge god, he can never afford to let his hand slip. A sudden gust of wind rattles the tapestries hanging on the walls, and you catch the scent of salt and sea. Poseidon has arrived, his presence filling the hall like the tide itself. His hair is wet seaweed clinging to his shoulders, and every step he takes leaves a glistening trail on the marble. Poseidon moves with the easy power of the ocean calm, but deep, always ready to rise up and swallow the world. He greets no one, his gaze sweeping the hall as if he's already bored with it. But you see the flicker of amusement in his eyes as he passes Dionysus, the god of wine, and the god of waves, sharing a knowing glance. Historians still argue whether Poseidon came to this feast because of loyalty to his brother Zeus, or simply to see if the walls of Olympus would crack under the weight of so much divine ego. But watching him now, you suspect it's both. He likes the chaos, likes to see what mortals and immortals do when the water rises just high enough to touch their toes. Hephaestus's gaze follows Poseidon, but he says nothing more. He simply leans back in his chair, his hands quiet, his thoughts hidden like the slow beat of a forge, waiting for the bellows to breathe life back into it. And you still clutching the memory of Ares' hand, still tasting the salt of the sea in the air, realize that the night has begun to shift again. The dance may be over for now, but the feast is far from done. The air shivers with the scent of salt and roasted meat as Poseidon moves further into the hall, the faint drip of seawater marking his path across the marble floor. His presence is like a quiet wave, steady and certain, and you can see how even the rowdy laughter of Dionysus seems to hush in his wake. Ares catches sight of Poseidon and grins, his teeth white and sharp. Brother of storms, he calls, raising his goblet high. Have you come to share the wine, or drown us all in your endless sea? Poseidon's lips curl in a faint smile, though his eyes are as deep and cold as the ocean floor. Perhaps both, he rumbles his voice low and steady. He takes a goblet from a passing nymph and drinks deeply the wine, slipping between lips that have tasted salt for longer than memory itself. Historians still argue whether Poseidon's moods are truly tied to the tides, or if the sea merely mirrors his endless hunger. Watching him now, you see the truth of it. He is the ocean, calm and deep, one moment, then crashing and wild the next. The music shifts as he moves the melody, taking on a rolling rhythm, the beat like the crash of waves against stone. Apollo's fingers dance over the strings of his lyre, trying to match the tide's slow, relentless pull. For a moment, the hall seems to sway with it, each guest caught in the undertow of Poseidon's quiet power. Hera's eyes flicker as she watches Poseidon, her smile brittle at the edges. She has spent so long trying to hold this feast together, and now the sea itself has come to test her patience. You see her fingers tighten around the stem of her goblet, the tension in her jaw as steady as the pulse of the music. Aphrodite leans closer to Dionysus, her laughter soft and edged with something sharper. He brings trouble. She murmurs, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. Dionysus just grins, his cheeks flushed with wine, his eyes glittering with the promise of mischief. A fringe tidbit you overhear from a minor river spirit. Poseidon has a trident carved from the bones of a sea serpent, a relic of battles long forgotten by mortal minds. They say it hums with the memory of those ancient wars, a song only he can hear. But tonight there is no trident, no crashing storm, only the soft lapping of water and the weight of his gaze as he surveys the room. Poseidon settles into a chair near the hearth, the steam rising from his skin as the warmth of the fire chases away the cold of the sea. He watches the dancers with mild amusement, his fingers drumming on the armrest like the quiet splash of water against a ship's hull. Ares, not to be outdone, stands and raises his goblet again. A duel. He roars, his voice ringing out across the hall. What better way to honor the sea's arrival than with steel and strength? Hera's face darkens, but she says nothing. This is not what she planned. Her feast was meant for laughter and alliance, not blood and challenge. But Ares' words hang in the air, heavy as the scent of salt. And you see how the gods lean forward, their eyes bright with the promise of violence. Historians still debate whether this was the moment the night turned the exact breath when the feast became a battlefield. But for you, there is no question the night has shifted, and no one, not even Hera, can pull it back. Ares draws his sword with a hiss of steel, the blade catching the firelight and turning it into a river of flame. He swings it lightly, almost lazily, but there is nothing careless in the way he holds it. His gaze sweeps the room, daring anyone to challenge him. Poseidon doesn't rise. He just smiles, that slow, knowing smile, and lifts his goblet in silent acknowledgement. Not tonight, he says, his voice a wave breaking softly on the shore. Your war will wait. Let us honor the night with drink, not blood. Ares laughs, the sound sharp as a blade, but he lowers his sword all the same. For now. The promise of battle lingers in the air like the faint tang of ozone before a storm. But the music rises again, and the gods return to their revelry. You exhale a breath you didn't know you were holding, the tension easing just enough to let you move again. You edge back to the shadow of the pillar, your heart still pounding your mind, buzzing with the knowledge that even the gods can be held in check, if only for a moment. Hera catches your eye across the room, and you see something like gratitude flicker there. She nods once, a silent command and a quiet thanks all in one. You bow your head in return, though you're not sure what role you're meant to play in all this. Mortal or not, you've become part of the story, a thread in the tapestry of this night. And as the music swells, as the wine flows and the laughter returns, you realize that this is what it means to stand at the edge of Olympus, to watch the gods dance and duel, to see the cracks in their perfect faces, and to know that even here in the heart of their power, nothing is ever truly safe. The feast thrums with a new heady energy, one that feels both exhilarating and a little too close to dangerous. You linger in the shadows, watching as Ares sheaths his sword with a metallic sigh, the promise of violence tamed for now. The music quickens, a bright, insistent rhythm that urges the guests back into motion. Across the room, Hephaestus still sits alone, his eyes distant. He doesn't join the dance or the toasts. He only watches the flicker of firelight on the walls. You wonder if he's thinking of the forge he left behind, the heat of the embers, the weight of the hammer in his hand. Historians still argue whether Hephaestus truly preferred the quiet of his workshop to the chaos of Olympus, or if he simply knew that even the finest feast couldn't warm him like the glow of molten metal. Nearby, Artemis prowls the edge of the room, her eyes sharp and restless. She's never been one for crowded halls and drunken laughter, and tonight is no exception. She slips through the revelers like a shadow, her presence cool and watchful. A nymph tries to catch her attention, but Artemis only shakes her head, her expression a polite mask that hides the wildness of the huntress beneath. A fringe tidbit you overhear from a satyr with wine-stained lips. Artemis's arrows are said to be tipped with moonlight itself, each one able to pierce the heart of a god or mortal alike. Whether that's true, or just another myth woven around her name, you can't help but shiver at the thought. You drift closer to the hearth where Hestia tends the flames with quiet devotion. She's a gentle presence in the midst of all this divine commotion, her hands steady as she feeds the fire. The flicker of the flames paints her face in warm gold, and for a moment the hall feels almost safe. Hestia glances up and offers you a small, serene smile. The hearth is the heart of every gathering, she says softly, her voice like the soft crackle of the fire. As long as it burns, the feast lives on. You nod, feeling a strange comfort in her words, a reminder that even the rowdiest banquet needs a steady flame at its center. Historians still debate whether Hestia was truly the quietest of the Olympians, or if she simply understood that sometimes the greatest power is in the simplest acts, like keeping the fire alive even when the rest of the world seems determined to burn. You're drawn back to the center of the room by the sound of Hermes' laughter, a light quicksilver sound that dances through the hall. He moves like a rumor slipping from group to group, his words a cascade of clever jokes and half-truths. In his hands, he juggles a set of silver coins, each one flashing in the torchlight like a promise. Hermes leans down to whisper something in the ear of a mortal poet, and you see the way the mortal's eyes widen his mouth, forming a silent O. Whatever Hermes said, it's enough to make him blush red as pomegranate seeds. Ares and Dionysus are deep in conversation now, their voices low but intense. You can't hear the words, but you see the glint in their eyes, the unspoken agreement of two gods who thrive on chaos. Dionysus laughs, tilting his head back as he drains another cup of wine. Ares just smirks his fingers, drumming on the table like a war drum echoing in the distance. Meanwhile, Hera stands at the edge of it all, her smile as bright and brittle as polished bronze. She raises her goblet, forcing her laughter to ring out clear and sweet, but you can see the cracks in the facade. She's trying so hard to hold this night together to keep the feast from tipping over the edge she can already see waiting. You almost pity her, almost. The music quickens again, and Artemis finally allows herself a single slow dance. Her movements are precise and controlled, each step a reflection of the moon's quiet grace. You watch her glide across the floor, the crowd parting like a forest before the huntress. She dances alone, and in her solitude she seems more powerful than any crowded circle of revelers. A fringe tidbit, some say Artemis once danced on the edge of the world, her feet tracing the line between night and day, her breath, the cool wind that tames the wildest flame. Tonight she is the moon incarnate, cold, beautiful, and utterly untouchable. The feast swells around you, a tide of laughter and music and clinking cups. You see how each god plays their part, how each mortal tries to carve out their own tiny corner of immortality. And you, still a mortal, still an intruder, stand at the edge, feeling the pulse of it all in your veins. As the music rises, you catch Hera's gaze again. Her eyes meet yours, and for a moment you see the weight she carries, the endless balancing act of a queen who must keep the gods in line and the night from shattering. Then she looks away, her smile slipping for just a heartbeat, and you wonder if even the queen of Olympus can truly control a night like this. The music shifts again, slower now, like the deep breathing of the hall itself. You feel the pulse of it in your bones, the weight of so many stories pressed into every flicker of torchlight and every whisper of silk across marble. The feast has entered a new rhythm, one of measured glances and careful steps, as if the guests sense that the night is balancing on a knife's edge. Artemis finishes her solitary dance and slips back into the shadows, her face a calm mask that reveals nothing. Her bow is slung across her back, the curve of it catching the light in a way that seems almost deliberate. A nymph passes her head bowed, and Artemis's hand brushes her shoulder in a fleeting gesture of comfort, one goddess to another, a silent promise that even in Olympus some bonds are sacred. You drift along the edge of the hall, the music a soft hum in your ears. Near the far wall, Poseidon has found a cup of wine at last, and he drinks with the deliberate slowness of a man who knows the weight of every wave he commands. A mortal tries to join him, some young sailor with salt still clinging to his skin, but Poseidon barely spares him a glance. His mind is on the deep, on the endless pull of tides, and the memory of drowned cities. A fringe tidbit you catch from a passing water nymph. There are parts of the ocean where even the gods fear to tread trenches so deep they swallow light itself. Places where the bones of old monsters sleep. Historians still argue whether these stories are truth or just the fever dreams of sailors lost at sea. But looking at Poseidon now, you suspect they're closer to truth than anyone wants to admit. Near the hearth, Hestia still tends the fire, her presence a quiet anchor in the chaos. She hums softly as she feeds another log to the flames, her hands moving with the certainty of centuries. The warmth soothes you, a gentle counterpoint to the electric tension that still crackles in the air. Hephaestus has turned his gaze back to the hearth as well, his face softened by the glow. You wonder if he sees in that small fire the reflection of his forge, the promise of creation, waiting in every flicker of heat. He doesn't speak, but there's a peace in his stillness, a rare calm that you find yourself craving. The doors at the far end of the hall open again, and a hush falls over the room. A figure steps through, cloaked in shadow, and for a moment no one breathes. It's the Sphinx, her feline grace coiled beneath a hooded cloak, her eyes glinting like polished amber as she surveys the crowd. A ripple of unease moves through the hall. This is a guest no one expected. She moves with the surety of a predator, each step silent and measured. She carries no weapon, but her presence is as sharp as any blade. Ares leans forward, his eyes narrowing. "What riddle have you brought us tonight, creature?" he asks, his voice low and eager. The Sphinx just smiles, her lips curling around a secret she has no intention of sharing yet. Historians still debate whether the Sphinx was truly one creature or many, a single riddle born of the desert's breath, or 1,000 whispers given form. Tonight, she is a question given flesh, and she has come to remind the gods that even they must answer to something older and stranger than themselves. Hera's expression tightens, but she forces a smile. "You're welcome here," she says, her voice smooth and regal. But tonight is a night of celebration, not challenge. The Sphinx tilts her head, amusement flickering in her eyes. "A banquet without questions is no banquet at all," she purrs. "Would you not have me sing for my supper, Queen of Gods?" A hush falls every ear, straining for her next word. The Sphinx lifts a single finger as if plucking the next line from the air itself. "Riddle me this," she says, her voice soft and deadly. "What walks on 4 legs at dawn, 2 at noon, and 3 in the twilight of the world?" A mortal near you gasps the old riddle the one mortals have whispered for centuries. But here, in the heart of Olympus, it's not just a game. It's a test, a challenge, a reminder that even in the halls of gods, some truths are older than the stones themselves. Hermes grins, his quicksilver mind already racing. "A mortal," he says easily. "Crawling as a babe, walking as a man leaning on a cane when the years weigh heavy." His answer is confident, certain. But the Sphinx only smiles wider. "Well enough," she says, her voice a purr that sends shivers down your spine. But remember, every answer carries another question. Her gaze sweeps the room, and for a moment, even the gods look uneasy. Then she bows a single graceful dip of her head and slips into the crowd like a shadow at dusk. The music stirs again, but it feels different now, softer, a little more fragile. The Sphinx has reminded them all that this night, like every night, is a fleeting thing, and the questions it asks will echo long after the last goblet is drained. You stand at the edge of it all, feeling the weight of her riddle settle into the marrow of your bones. And you realize this night isn't just a feast. It's a story, a mystery, and you're as much a part of it as the gods themselves. The hall seems to breathe around you, the music weaving through the flickering torchlight like a living thing. The riddle of the Sphinx has left a hush in its wake, a silence that tastes of old secrets and half-forgotten truths. You watch as the gods shift in their seats, some laughing a little too loud to hide their unease, others falling quiet as the weight of the night settles over them. Poseidon lifts his goblet, his gaze distant as he swirls the dark wine. The sea is never far from him. You realize no matter how many golden halls he strides through the salt, and the storm are always at his fingertips. He takes a long drink, and for a moment you swear you can taste the tang of brine in the air. Ares stretches his shoulders, rolling like thunderclouds gathering on the horizon. He's bored again. You can see it in the restless way he taps his fingers on the table, the gleam in his eyes that promises trouble. Hera watches him carefully, her smile pinned in place like a mask she can't remove. Historians still debate whether she loved him as her own, or merely tolerated the god of war, because the world has always needed a little chaos. You drift closer to the hearth, drawn by the comforting glow of Hestia's fire. She hums a quiet melody as she feeds another log to the flames, her fingers moving with the surety of centuries. The warmth seeps into your skin, softening the chill left by the Sphinx's question. In this flickering light, you almost believe that everything might yet hold together. But then a sudden crash shatters the fragile calm, a goblet tumbling from Dionysus's hand, shattering on the marble with a sound like thunder. He laughs, tipping back in his chair, and you see the wine stain the floor like a crimson wound. Another, he calls his voice rich and heavy with drink. The satyr at his side obliges, refilling the cup with a flourish. A fringe tidbit you catch from a mortal servant scurrying past the wine Dionysus favors tonight is said to come from the slopes of Nysa, a mortal vineyard that no longer exists, swallowed by the earth or the god's own appetites. Historians still argue whether that wine was ever real or if it was just another of Dionysus's endless illusions. Dionysus raises his new goblet, his eyes sparkling. "Come," he says, his voice a low purr. "Let us toast to the questions that have no answers, to the riddles that bind us tighter than any chain." His words are light, but you hear the edge in them, the quiet understanding that even the gods can be caught by the snare of a well-asked question. The music picks up again, a swirling dance that pulls the guests back into motion. You see Aphrodite glide across the floor, her laughter bright and sharp, as she draws the eyes of every god and mortal in the room. Even Ares watches her now, his smirk softening into something almost gentle almost. But you can see the way Hera's fingers tighten around her cup, the way her gaze flickers from guest to guest, like a queen taking stock of her kingdom. This was meant to be her night, her triumph. And now it's slipping away, with every heartbeat, every laugh that's not hers. A mortal bard steps forward, his lyre trembling in his hands. He begins to sing a song of heroes and heartbreak, of battles lost and won. His voice is clear and sweet, and for a moment the hall holds its breath to listen. Even the gods pause their arguments and games forgotten, as the mortal's melody weaves its way around them like a spell. Hephaestus leans forward, his eyes half closed as he listens. You wonder if he's hearing the clink of hammers in the bard's song, the soft hiss of molten metal cooling in the dark. Historians still debate whether Hephaestus ever envied the poets their craft, the way they could shape words as he shaped iron. Watching him now, you think perhaps he does just a little. When the song ends, the hall erupts in applause. Even Hera joins in, though her smile never quite reaches her eyes. The bard bows low, his face flushed with the triumph of the moment. You see the way he grips the neck of his lyre, his knuckles white. A mortal in a room of gods, but tonight his song made him their equal. You slip away from the crowd, your thoughts spinning. The feast is still alive with music and laughter, but the cracks are there, thin and bright as lightning against a dark sky. And you, still an intruder, still an observer, feel the weight of those cracks in your bones. As you watch the revelry swirl around you, you realize the night is a tapestry of questions now. The Sphinx's riddle, the apple's promise, the quiet watchfulness of Hera's eyes, each thread pulling tighter, each beat of music another stitch in a story that's far from over. The music hums like a heartbeat beneath the laughter, but you can feel the edges of the night fraying. The air has a charge to it, a quiet crackle that makes the hair on your arms stand up. You move carefully through the shifting tides of the feast, each step a dance of its own. Near the hearth, Hestia's fire flickers and pops the embers glowing like tiny suns. She tends it with gentle hands, her movements unhurried and calm. It's a small island of peace in the midst of the gods' swirling moods. She catches your eye and nods as if to say whatever else happens, the fire will still burn. But beyond her quiet glow, the room has taken on a sharper edge. Ares leans forward, his eyes glinting in the torchlight. He's restless, you can see it, the itch of battle in his shoulders, the way his fingers tap out a rhythm only he can hear. Across the room, Dionysus laughs, but it's a little too loud, a little too bright. His cup is never empty, and the wine stains his lips like a secret he can't quite swallow. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a god of chaos or of salvation, whether his wine freed mortals from their chains, or just made them forget they ever wore them. Watching him tonight, you see the truth in both. His laughter is as dangerous as Ares' sword, each sip a gamble with oblivion. A mortal servant passes close to you, her hands trembling as she balances a tray of honey cakes. You see the way her eyes flick from guest to guest, wide and frightened. In a room like this, mortals are as fragile as those cakes, sweet and easily crumbled. Aphrodite glides past her perfume, a whisper of roses and salt air. She pauses to pluck a pomegranate seed from a platter, her fingers delicate and deliberate. She catches your gaze and smiles, and you feel your pulse quicken despite yourself. She doesn't say a word, but in her smile is the promise that she knows every secret you've ever tried to hide. A fringe tidbit you catch from a passing nymph. Some say pomegranates were first grown in the gardens of the underworld, a fruit of both life and death. Historians still debate whether Persephone truly loved the taste, or if each seed was a chain she could never break. Hera stands near the center of the hall, her expression smooth and regal. But you see the way her hand tightens on her goblet, the way her eyes track every movement in the room. She's still trying to pull the night back together to remind them all that this is her feast, her night. But the music has changed, and she can't unweave the song once it's begun. Near the edge of the room, Hermes slips through the crowd like a rumor given form. His laughter is quick and bright, his words a balm and a blade all at once. He leans down to whisper in the ear of a mortal boy, and you see the way the boy's eyes widen, the way his breath catches in his throat. Hermes is the patron of travelers, but tonight, he's the patron of every whispered secret and every half-true promise. You slip closer to the hearth, drawn by the quiet steadiness of Hestia's presence. She looks up as you approach, her smile soft and knowing. It's easy to forget, she says, her voice is gentle as the crackle of the fire, that even the gods can lose themselves in a night like this. Her words are a comfort, a reminder that the chaos around you is just another kind of dance. Poseidon has grown silent, his gaze fixed on the flickering flames. You see the weight in his shoulders, the endless depth in his eyes. For all his storms and salt-slick laughter, there's something ancient and still in him tonight, a memory of deep trenches and dark waters that no light can touch. The music shifts again, a slower melody that weaves through the room like a sigh. The dancers move more carefully now, each step measured, each smile a little more fragile. The golden glow of the torches seems softer, as if the night itself is drawing closer around them. You watch as Aphrodite and Ares share a glance, quick, electric, and gone in a heartbeat. You see Dionysus pour another cup of wine, the liquid catching the light like blood. And you see Hera standing tall and proud, but with a crack in her smile that grows a little wider each time the music falters. Historians still debate whether nights like this were truly meant for feasting, or if they were just another stage for the gods to play out their endless dramas. But watching them now, you know that for all their power, they are as bound to this dance as any mortal in the room. And you, still standing at the edge of it, all feel the pull of the music, the weight of the stories swirling around you. You realize that this night, like every night, is a moment balanced on the edge of a blade, bright, dangerous, and utterly unforgettable. The music softens, weaving through the hall like smoke. You feel it wrap around you, each note a gentle tug at the frayed edges of the night. The dancers slow their laughter, fading to quiet murmurs as the feast enters another rhythm, a breath held in the flickering light. Hermes appears at your side without a sound, his smile quick and knowing. Enjoying the show, he asks, his voice low and amused. Before you can answer, he's already slipping away, his laughter a silver thread in the air. He's a trickster, you realize, more than just a messenger. He's the keeper of every secret whispered in the dark, the one who knows how to slip through the cracks in any story. You drift closer to the hearth, drawn again to Hestia's steady presence. She hums a soft melody as she tends the flames, her hands sure and gentle. The fire doesn't care who dances, she murmurs as you watch her work. It burns for everyone. Her words settle into you, a quiet truth in the midst of the gods' swirling games. Ares leans against a pillar, his expression sharp and restless. He watches the dancers with a predator's patience, his fingers drumming on the hilt of his sword. You wonder if he's already imagining the clash of shields, the taste of iron on his tongue. Historians still argue whether Ares truly loved the chaos of battle, or if he simply didn't know how to be anything else. Tonight, he looks like a man who can't remember any other way to move through the world. Near the center of the room, Aphrodite weaves through the crowd, her laughter a soft ripple in the torchlight. She stops to whisper in the ear of a mortal youth, her hand brushing his shoulder as he blushes crimson. She moves on her gaze, lingering on every smile, every quickened breath. A fringe tidbit you overhear from a passing nymph. Some say Aphrodite's laughter can shatter hearts as easily as it binds them. Watching her now, you believe it. Zeus remains seated, his expression unreadable. His fingers drum a slow, steady rhythm on the arm of his chair, a sound like distant thunder. Hera stands beside him, her smile as bright and brittle as polished gold. She laughs at some jest from Dionysus, but her eyes never leave Zeus's face. She's the queen of Olympus, but tonight, you see the cracks in her crown. A mortal bard begins another song, his voice low and rich, the melody winding through the hall like a half-remembered dream. The words are old, older than the stones of Olympus, older than the memory of the gods themselves. You hear them in your bones, feel them in the slow rise and fall of your breath. Historians still debate whether these songs are mortal creations or gifts from the muses themselves. But here, in the flicker of the firelight, you know they are both mortal hands shaping divine echoes into something that can be held, if only for a moment. The Sphinx sits at the edge of the room, her amber eyes glowing in the shadows. She watches everything silent and amused, her tail flicking lazily, as if she knows every secret already. She doesn't ask another riddle tonight, she doesn't need to. Her presence alone is enough to remind the gods that every feast has its price, every answer its echo. You slip closer to the window, the night air cool against your skin. The stars above are bright and endless, each one a promise of something more. For a moment, the weight of the hall lifts, and you remember that the world beyond these walls is wide and waiting. But when you turn back, you see that the dance has already begun again. Hermes leads the next round of music, his voice weaving a tale of lost loves and found fortunes, each word a thread in the tapestry of the night. The gods laugh and lean closer, their eyes bright and hungry. The mortals watch in wonder, each one caught in the glow of something too bright to hold. Aphrodite winks at you as she passes, her smile warm and a little wicked. Ares meets your gaze for a moment, his eyes sharp and assessing, as if measuring whether you're worth the challenge. And Hera's gaze is a weight on your shoulders, a reminder that you are here at her feast, her mercy, and that even in this moment of borrowed wonder, you are still mortal. The music swells, the laughter rises, and the feast continues, each breath, another thread in the endless dance. You feel it all around you, the weight of history, the shimmer of myth. the heartbeat of the night itself. And as you stand at the edge of it all, you realize this is what it means to stand in the shadow of the gods, not to be a part of their stories, but to watch them unfold, each one as bright and fragile as the flicker of Hestia's hearth. The night deepens, each heartbeat a soft echo in the cavernous hall. The music still drifts through the air, but it's quieter now, a murmured prayer instead of a triumphant song. You slip through the crowd like a ghost, weaving between laughter and lingering glances, the soft glow of torchlight painting your skin in gold. At the center of the room, Dionysus has gathered a small circle of revelers, their eyes bright and a little too wide. His laughter spills over them like honeyed wine, sweet and thick, and they drink it in greedily. You catch a fragment of his words as you pass something about the price of ecstasy, the cost of forgetting. A fringe tidbit you overhear from a satyr with flushed cheeks. Dionysus's cup never truly empties. It fills itself with the desires of whoever drinks from it. Historians still argue whether that was divine magic or just a story told to make the wine taste sweeter. Ares is no longer watching the dance. He stands at the edge of the room, arms folded, his gaze fixed on the crack in the marble floor where the golden apple once lay. His fingers twitch at his sides, the restless energy of a warrior who can't find a battle. You see the tension in his jaw, the flicker of impatience in his eyes. Hera's feast may be laughter and song, but for Ares, it's always a waiting game war in disguise. Near the hearth, Hephaestus stirs at last. He rises slowly, his movements deliberate, as if he's testing each joint, each muscle that has grown stiff from sitting too long. He crosses the room without a word, his steps silent on the marble. He pauses beside Hera's throne, his eyes meeting hers for a moment, an unspoken question, a promise forged in the quiet glow of the fire. Hera's smile softens just for an instant. She reaches out her fingers, brushing his arm, and you see the weight of centuries in that small, tender gesture. Historians still debate whether Hera ever truly loved Hephaestus, or if he was just another piece in her endless game of power and pride. But tonight you see something real in that fleeting touch, something fragile and warm like the last embers of a dying fire. The Sphinx watches them from the shadows, her eyes half closed, her tail curling lazily around her feet. She doesn't speak, but you feel her question lingering in the air. What price will you pay for your secrets? And who will ask the next riddle? Hermes dances through the crowd, his laughter bright and brittle. He snatches a fig from a passing tray and tosses it into the air, catching it on his tongue, with the easy grace of someone who has never known stillness. He winks at you as he passes, his eyes glinting like quicksilver. Careful, he murmurs, his voice a whisper against your ear. Even the gods can be tricked by the games they play. You drift toward the window again, the cool night air a balm against the heat of the hall. The stars above are sharp and bright, the moon a thin silver smile in the darkness. For a moment, you let yourself breathe. Let yourself remember that the world beyond these walls is bigger than the feast, bigger than the games of gods and mortals. But the hall pulls you back, the music, a siren's call that you can't resist. The dancers move slower now, their steps more careful, as if they're each carrying the weight of the night in their arms. You catch glimpses of quiet conversations, soft words traded in the shadows, promises made and broken secrets whispered into the flicker of torchlight. Hestia's fire still burns a steady glow at the heart of the feast. She moves with quiet purpose, her hands gentle as she feeds another log to the flames. You see the way she glances at Hera, at Zeus, at every god and mortal who passes near her hearth. Her presence is a promise. No matter how the night twists and turns, the fire will remain. Poseidon has grown still, his gaze fixed on the surface of his wine, as if he can see the endless depths of the sea reflected there. You wonder what he's thinking, what storms he's remembering, what waves he's counting in the silence of his thoughts. The music slows again, a final note hanging in the air like a breath held too long. You feel the weight of it in your chest, the hush that settles over the room as every guest waits for what comes next. And in that silence, you realize that the night is a riddle of its own. Each laugh, each sigh, each stolen glance, another piece of a puzzle that only the gods themselves can hope to solve. The night's quiet grows deeper still, the torches burning lower their light a warm, flickering hush against the marble walls. You stand near the edge of it all your breath, a soft ghost in the hush. The music has stopped, but the silence is a song of its own, a slow, heavy melody that presses against your chest. Hera sits on her throne, her back straight, her gaze cold as starlight. She watches the room with the weary patience of someone who has spent centuries trying to keep the cracks from splitting wider. Her hands rest in her lap, but you see the tension in her knuckles, the way her shoulders hold the weight of the hall. Zeus leans back in his chair, his eyes half-lidded, his fingers drumming a slow, steady beat on the armrest. He looks bored, but you can feel the storm waiting just behind his calm, the same slow thunder that has hovered all night. A fringe tidbit you'd heard from a nymph earlier. Zeus's silences are never empty. They're just the quiet before the lightning. Historians still argue whether he truly controls his storms, or if they're just another face of his endless moods. Ares shifts his weight restless and taut as a drawn bow. He's tired of waiting, tired of watching. His eyes flicker to Athena, who stands at the far end of the hall, her gaze cool and clear. She doesn't look at him, but the tilt of her chin is challenge enough. A silent duel, no weapons needed, just the weight of old rivalries, and the knowledge that even tonight, war is never far away. Hera's lips tighten as she takes in the room. She's held it together longer than most would have managed, but you see the moment she lets go. It's a small thing, just a soft sigh, a flicker of her eyes toward the darkened windows, but in that breath, you see her decide enough. She rises slowly, her gown a whisper of storm clouds against the marble. The room stills around her, every eye drawn to her, as if she's the axis of the world itself. She lifts her chin, her voice soft but clear. "This feast is done," she says, and though the words are gentle, they ring like the crack of thunder. A hush falls, the music's absence suddenly louder. Even Dionysus stops lapping his cup frozen halfway to his lips. Hera's gaze sweeps the room, her eyes bright and unyielding. "You've had your revels," she says. "You've sung your songs, told your riddles. But the night is mine, and it ends when I say it does." Ares bristles, his mouth twisting in a scowl. So soon, he growls, his voice low and dangerous. But Hera doesn't flinch. "Enough," she says again, and this time there's no room for argument. Historians still debate whether this was the night Hera's patience finally broke, or if she had planned this end all along, another quiet move in a game that none of the others could see. Watching her now, you think perhaps it's both. The Queen of Olympus knows when to let the music play and when to call for silence. Zeus lifts his goblet, his expression unreadable. "As you wish, my queen," he says, his voice soft and amused. But you see the spark in his eyes, the promise of storms yet to come. He drains the cup and sets it down with a soft clink that sounds like the end of something old and fragile. Aphrodite sighs, her laughter slipping away like a memory. She rises from her seat, her gown shimmering in the dimming light. Until next time, she murmurs, her voice a velvet promise. She doesn't look at Ares, but you see the way his gaze lingers on her as she moves through the room. Hermes grins, his eyes bright as he tucks a coin into the folds of his tunic. "The night is never truly done," he says, his words light and quick. It just changes shape. And with that, he's gone slipping through the crowd like smoke. You watch as the guests begin to move, their laughter softer now, their steps slower. The air itself seems to sigh, the feast's energies slipping away like the last echo of a song. Near the hearth, Hestia's fire still burns, a warm promise in the quiet. She catches your eye and nods once a silent benediction as the night draws to its close. And you stand at the edge of it all, feeling the weight of what's past and what still waits in the shadows. Because if there's one thing you've learned tonight, it's that no feast, no song, no riddle is ever truly finished. They just slip into silence, waiting for the next breath to bring them back to life. Zeus pushes back his chair, the scrape of marble on marble echoing through the hush like a final chord. He rises slowly, stretching his shoulders with the lazy grace of a predator who knows he's already won. His eyes sweep the room, and for a moment you see the thunder behind them, the quiet, coiled power of the sky itself. Even now, at the end of the night, he is the storm that no one can truly escape. Hera stands beside him, her head high, her expression serene. But you see the flicker of relief in her eyes she has reclaimed. The night pulled it back from the brink of chaos, and she will not let it slip away again. A fringe tidbit from a passing satyr, they say Hera once held the whole of Olympus in the palm of her hand, shaping its feasts and its silences with equal skill. Historians still argue whether it was love or sheer will that gave her that power. The guests begin to drift toward the doors, their laughter softer now, their movements measured. Dionysus lingers near the hearth, his cup half empty, his smile half mad. He catches your gaze and raises his goblet in a silent toast, an unspoken promise that the night's wine will still burn in your veins long after the last torch has guttered. Hermes is already at the door, his fingers flicking a silver coin into the air. He winks at you, his eyes bright and knowing, and you realize he's been watching you all along, every breath, every heartbeat. Safe travels, he says, his voice a soft thread in the hush. And remember, the night never truly ends. Aphrodite trails her fingers across the backs of the chairs as she passes her smile, a secret meant for no one and everyone. She doesn't speak, but in the sway of her hips and the tilt of her head, you see the promise of 1,000 more nights just like this one, each one more beautiful, more dangerous than the last. Ares pauses at the threshold, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. His eyes find yours in the half-light, and for a moment you see the hunger there, the need for motion, for the clash of steel and the taste of victory. He nods once a silent challenge, and then he's gone, the echo of his steps fading into the night. Near the hearth, Hestia tends the last flickering embers, her hands moving with quiet reverence. She hums softly the melody older than memory, and you feel it settle into the marrow of your bones, a promise that no matter how wild the night, there will always be a flame waiting to guide you home. Poseidon moves like the tide, slow and steady, each step a soft sigh of water against stone. He pauses beside Hera, his voice low and quiet, a murmur you can't catch but feel in your chest. They share a look, old, tired, but somehow tender, and then he turns away, the salt of the sea trailing in his wake. The Sphinx is the last to move her eyes, half-lidded, her tail curling with lazy grace. She glances back at you as she slips through the shadows, her smile a question you don't know how to answer. A riddle with no solution, a promise that some mysteries are meant to stay just out of reach. Zeus and Hera stand together for a moment, their figures framed by the flickering torches. She rests a hand on his arm, and he inclines his head, the storm in his eyes banked for now. Historians still debate whether their peace was ever real or just another fragile truce in the endless war of their marriage. But tonight, in the quiet glow of the dying fire, they stand united, if only for a breath. You step back, the marble pool under your feet, the last echoes of music ringing in your ears. The night is ending, but the story is not. Because you know now that even in the halls of the gods, nothing truly ends, it only waits for the next telling. And as the last guests slip into the darkness, as the torches gutter and the marble floor grows cool, you stand at the edge of it, all mortal and small, but part of something ancient and endless. The night is done for now, but tomorrow the gods will feast again, and the music will rise once more. The last of the guests are gone, their laughter and footsteps fading into the quiet of the night beyond the bronze doors. The hall is a hushed echo of what it was just hours before, a place of secrets and shadows, of soft embers and half-forgotten songs. You stand near the window, the chill of the night air seeping into your bones, and you watch as Hera surveys the empty room. She moves with slow deliberation, her hand brushing the back of a chair, her gaze lingering on the overturned goblet that still stains the marble red. For all her poise and power, there is something almost human in her, now a flicker of exhaustion, of regret. A fringe tidbit you recall from a half-whispered tale: even the queen of the gods must sleep, though she never lets anyone see it. Historians still argue whether this night was her triumph or her undoing, but in this moment she is simply a woman in the aftermath of a night that tried to slip from her grasp. Zeus stands beside her, silent and watchful. His expression is calm, but you can see the storm that still crackles in the lines of his face. He doesn't speak, but his presence is a weight, a reminder that even the quiet has teeth. He lifts a hand, and a soft rumble of thunder rolls across the distant sky, a promise or a warning you can't quite tell. Hestia kneels by the hearth, her fingers coaxing the last embers to life. The glow of the fire flickers across her face, warm and gentle. She hums under her breath, and the sound is a balm in the cold hush. You watch her and realize that the heart of the night is not in the music or the laughter, but in the steady pulse of her fire, a light that endures when all else has faded. Hephaestus lingers near the hearth, his broad hands resting on the mantle. He doesn't speak, but the quiet strength in his posture speaks volumes. You see the way he looks at the fire, the way his eyes soften in the glow. Historians still debate whether he ever truly belonged in these feasts of laughter and bright voices, or if his forge was the only place he ever called home. Watching him now, you think perhaps it was both. Aphrodite's perfume still clings to the air, a faint echo of roses and salt. The memory of her laughter shimmers in the empty spaces, a promise that even in silence, beauty can linger. Ares's presence is a quieter echo, a restless energy that still hums in the corners of the room, a memory of the challenge he never got to answer. You step carefully across the marble floor, your footsteps soft in the hush. The hall feels different now, no longer a stage for gods and mortals, but a place where the echoes of the night settle like dust. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze shield hanging on the wall, eyes bright, face flushed with the weight of what you've seen, and the stories that have wrapped themselves around you like a cloak. Hera turns at last, her eyes meeting yours in the dim light. There's something in that gaze, something that sees you not as a mortal interloper, but as a witness. She inclines her head, a quiet acknowledgement, and for a moment you feel the weight of her gratitude. The feast is over, but the story remains, and you have carried it with you in every breath. A fringe tidbit you remember from a mortal's tale: the night is never truly silent, not even when the music fades. There is always the soft murmur of the world turning the quiet heartbeat of the earth beneath your feet. Historians still debate whether these hushed songs are real or just the echo of our own restless thoughts. But tonight, you hear them soft and sure, like the last note of a song that never truly ends. The torches flicker one last time, and then the room is lit only by the glow of Hestia's fire. You watch as Hera and Zeus turn away their steps, quiet, but certain, their figures framed by the soft light as they leave the hall behind. The door closes behind them with a soft click, and you are left in the hush of the aftermath. And you stand there alone, but not lonely, feeling the weight of the night settle around you. The feast has ended, but the echoes remain soft and patient, waiting for the next voice to stir them back to life. The silence of the hall is thick as honey, every breath a quiet echo of what came before. You stand at the hearth, the last flickers of Hestia's fire casting long, gentle shadows. The marble floor still holds the warmth of the night, and you let it seep into your feet, a soft grounding in the cool hush that has settled over everything. Hera and Zeus are gone now, their presence a memory in the stillness. Hephaestus lingers a moment longer, his hand resting on the mantle as if to leave some of his forge's quiet strength behind. Then he turns away, his footsteps heavy but sure, and the hush folds in around him like a blanket. Historians still debate whether he was truly part of these revels or just a guest in his own hall. Watching him leave, you see the answer in the glow of the last embers. He was always here, in the quiet places, in the steady heat that outlasts the brightest flame. You take a slow breath and let your eyes wander across the empty tables, the scattered goblets, the faint trace of perfume that lingers in the air like a sigh. The feast is done, but the story of it, every laugh, every whispered secret still hums in the bones of the marble. You feel it in your skin, the echo of divine voices and mortal fears twined together in the hush. Hestia moves quietly around the hearth, her hands gentle as she tends the last flickers of flame. She doesn't speak, but her presence is a promise. As long as the fire burns, there is still light in the dark. You watch her for a while, the soft rhythm of her breath, the quiet surety in the curve of her shoulders. She doesn't need to raise her voice to be heard. Aphrodite's laughter is gone, but the memory of it shimmers in the corners of the hall, a bright thread in the tapestry of the night. Ares's restless energy has slipped into the hush, but you can still feel it, a low thrum, a promise that some hungers never truly sleep. Poseidon's sea salt tang lingers, a cool breath that tastes of distant storms and deep water. A fringe tidbit you recall from an old tale, some say the halls of Olympus never truly sleep. That even in the hush of midnight there are footsteps in the shadows, whispers that slip under the doors like smoke. Historians still argue whether those whispers are memories or warnings, but tonight you hear them, a soft susurration that promises the story isn't done. You step closer to the window, the cool night air brushing against your skin. The stars above are bright and cold, the moon a pale coin in the sky. You watch the world outside the hall, the quiet stretch of mountain, the dark sweep of forest, and you know that everything that happened here tonight will ripple out into that darkness, weaving itself into the stories that mortals will tell for generations. And you stand at the edge of it, all mortal and small, but part of something vast and ancient. You feel the weight of it in your bones, the slow, patient heartbeat of a world that never stops turning. The night is over, the feast is done, but you carry it with you each step, an echo of what you saw, what you heard, what you felt in the flicker of torchlight and the hush of gods at play. The last of the embers glows softly in the hearth, Hestia's steady promise that warmth endures. You take a breath, and for a moment you let yourself believe it, that even in the quiet, there is always a light waiting to guide you home. The hall is empty now, the echoes of laughter and music slipping into the shadows like dreams at dawn. You stand there, breathing in the quiet, feeling the weight of the night begin to lift. The marble floor cools beneath your feet, the last whispers of warmth fading into the hush. Hestia's fire burns low, a soft glow that holds back the darkness for just a little longer. You close your eyes and let the stillness settle into your bones. The night has left its mark, each moment, each stolen glance, and soft word, a thread in the tapestry you now carry within you. The world outside waits, but for a few more heartbeats, you let yourself drift in the hush, the slow pulse of the dying embers, a lullaby that calms your restless thoughts. You think of Hera's quiet fury, of Zeus's thunderous silence, of Ares's restless hunger and Aphrodite's laughter like moonlight on dark water. You think of the Sphinx's riddle, a question that lingers even now in the corners of your mind. Each memory a soft glow in the hush, each one a story waiting to be told again. You step away from the hearth, your breath steady and slow. The marble hall is just stone and silence now, but in the quiet you hear the promise of the next story, the next feast, the next night, when the gods will dance, and the mortals will watch, and the world will hold its breath. You let the night slip through your fingers like water, each step carrying you back to the world that waits beyond these walls. And as you walk away, you feel the warmth of the last embers at your back, a gentle glow to guide you into the darkness, a promise that no night lasts forever.